Hello, I'm your instructor, Mr. Mizell. As you know, I'm just kidding. What kind of democracy do you have? Well, that's kind of a weird question, right? You can only ask that question if you have asked these questions, and the answer to your question is democracy. Then you have to ask, what kind of democracy? If you answer this question with one of these two answers, autocracy or oligarchy, and remember the question is, what form of leadership do they have and how do citizens participate? If you answer that question with one of these two answers, you're done. You don't have to ask any more questions of that government. However, if you answer with democracy, you've got one more question to go. You've got to come over here and say, what kind of democracies? There are two, only two, predominant, and that means main kind of democracies. The first one, the one you're real familiar with because you live in one, is the presidential democracy. Now the presidential democracy goes like this. It has nothing to do with, does a country have a president? It has everything to do with how is the chief of the government, how is the head of the government elected? How does he get to be the head of the government, or she, whatever the case may be? Here's how it happens in a presidential election, or a presidential democracy. Citizens vote directly for the head of the government. Now the head of the government can be called, he can be called the president, he can be called the head of the government. He can be called the Grand Poupon if you want to. It doesn't matter what you call him, it matters on how did he get elected. If the citizens went into the voting booth and they said, I want that guy to be my leader, and they checked the box next to his name, that's a direct election. One vote for that person, and the most votes wins. Parliamentary democracies are way more complicated. I don't quite understand them. Where you find parliamentary democracies in the world are places that have been heavily influenced by the United Kingdom, because they're the ones that invented this, okay? So they came up with the parliamentary system, and they are the ones that, when they colonized other countries, if those countries liked the British, or when they gained their independence, if they were kind of still connected with the British, then they also usually have a parliamentary democracy. If they weren't really connected with the British, like the United States of America, we hated the British when we broke away from them. We did something way different, and we kind of invented the presidential democracy, or we like to think we did. So, out of rebellion, right? We didn't want to be like them anymore. So, here we go. Here's the parliamentary democracy. The parliamentary democracy follows this way, and this is really complicated, so I need you to pay attention, and if you need to pause or rewind or go back until you understand this, please do. It literally means this. The head of government is indirectly elected. I'll explain that further. That means is, let me think about how to word this real simple. I'm just going to say, I'm going to abbreviate. H-O-G, head of government, the hog. The hog is elected as part of the legislature. If, on election day, he happens to be the leader of the political party that ends up with the most votes in the legislature, then he automatically becomes the head of the government. How's that for complicated? So the hog is elected as part of the legislature. Then, if he or she is the leader of the political party with the most members in the legislature, then that person becomes the head of government or the chief executive or, as I like to refer to them, as the hog. I just came up with that on the fly, by the way, while we're taping. I'm kind of proud of that. So you can remember it. Head of government is a hog. Alright, yeah. So, we're going to do some role playing in class to help you understand this, because this is a little bit complicated. But you should know, just because this person becomes head of the government does not mean that they're no longer part of the legislature. They still remain as a part of the legislature, so they get to vote on how laws are passed, but they also control the government. They're the chief executive. So, the head of government in a parliamentary democracy is more powerful than the head of government in a presidential democracy. And yes, usually this guy is, or this gal is called the prime minister. And usually, the head of government up here is called the president, but not always. Great example of this kind of democracy is the United States. A great example of this, and I'm just using the originators of these ideas, the great example of a presidential democracy is the United States of America. The great example of a parliamentary democracy is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Good day to you.